Hello everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with members from our very selective network, Boardroom by EMIR, and I'm delighted for this conversation. It's a very, very special edition because we are having the author's edition. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask each of our guests to introduce themselves and give a short premise of the book that they have just recently published. Renee, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Trevor. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Renee McGowan. I am the CEO of McFarlane across India, Middle East and Africa. The book that has just been published is The Friday Email, which is 88 tips for aspiring leaders. And it came about from a Friday email that I've sent to colleagues, which is just a short, sharp email designed to engage with people. And what I found is, phenomenal engagement and feedback from that, and it's ended up in a book.
We'll jump more into the book in a minute. Patrick, if you want to introduce yourself and just a short synopsis of the book, and we'll come back around to it.
My name is Patrick Samaha. I wrote a book called It Makes Zero Sense. It makes a lot of sense, by the way, after this podcast. The concept of the book is about pretty much elimination of negatives. I was a corporate guy. I left the corporate world, and being an author is something that I'm starting to learn and become better at. Hopefully, eliminating all the negatives I had from writing to becoming a better author.
Okay. Excellent, Eleni.
Okay, I'm Eleni Kitra. I'm the CEO of Kitra Inclusive and the Executive Director of Advertising Business Group, and I wrote a book called Force, which is the stories of 18 amazing people from around the world, leaders, transformers, trailblazers. But the main point in here is the real story that comes out of themselves and how they become force and people that can transform their world and the world of others.
Wonderful. So each of your books, genuinely, I think our members will find fascinating. So let's just go into them in a little bit more detail. So Renee, your one really was born out of the pandemic, right? So tell us more about that. Tell us how it came about. And tell us how, I think it's an interesting story of how it ended up on the pages as well.
Sure. So it did start with the pandemic. I was leading a business across Asia at the time, thousands of colleagues, and used to traveling around all of the countries and having great dialogues and exchanges and getting a feel for the business from colleagues. And of course, all of that abruptly stopped when we all went into our houses. So one day I was out for a run on a Friday morning, came back and thought, I'm just going to record something for colleagues. So I recorded a video, put a little note with it and sent it out as an email. So very not corporate, if you like. And I just was overwhelmed and surprised by the response. So it was about connecting with colleagues, about saying we're all in the same place. And so it just continued from there. And each email was just designed to be short and sharp. It was a little bit about where I was as a leader, a bit about where the business was so that everybody was up to date. And then maybe something that I'd read that was interesting that might inspire and things like that. And it just continued on. I did try to stop a little bit because it was a bit of a lift every week. And then it was actually a colleague who took a bunch of them to a publisher and said, what about this as a book? It's really resonated.
So a colleague brought it to the publisher without you knowing?
Yes, without me knowing the cheeky things.
Well, they must know you very well.
They did know me very well. Yeah. Took a bunch of them to the publisher who then rang and said, here's why I think it would make a great book, and we embarked from there.
I wonder, this is the power of exercise. I wonder after your run, you came back from that run full of endorphins and said, do you know what, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And that's why it resonated with a lot of people, right? Because you were showing your authentic self, you were showing that you care about them, and you were giving them an update on the business. And during that point in time, I think everybody kind of felt like they needed that. What are some of your favorite Friday emails, or ones that you feel that resonate the most with you or kind of have the most color to them?
The ones that resonated the most with colleagues was where I shared pieces around with my family as well, because, during the pandemic, we were all, and I was in Asia, so we were really in lockdown for quite some time. So sharing pieces around living with your family 24/7 and the reality of that resonates with everybody, regardless of culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then I think the pieces that were really interesting was when I started to ask questions, just little bits in terms of, this is what's happening in the business. What do do you think what we should be thinking? What are your ideas? And people would genuinely come back there. And then, you know, people would start to suggest other ideas. Can we have a little coffee chat, a 15-minute coffee chat? And all of these things unfolded there. So for me, it was less about the individual tips that were in there and more about the engagement that it created with thousands of colleagues that I just wouldn't have had otherwise.
I have a question for you. I think as leaders sometimes, right, you came up with this great idea. It turned into a substantial bit of work, I'd imagine, each week, because you have to put a lot of thought into these things. And then you perhaps thought, okay, maybe I should dial this back a bit, or, you know, reduce the frequency of it. And I believe you guys done a survey of the team to check if you wanted to keep doing this. And it was an overwhelming response that they wanted to continue to receive it, right? I'd be just curious as a leader when that came in, right? Because I feel like sometimes when you do things, your team are overly polite and nice to you, right? Yes. Even no matter how much you try to say to them, like, and what was that like, getting that survey back to see that everybody wanted it? Was there a moment of thinking, oh, okay, you know, this is a validation in a way?
Well, I'll be really honest, and the first bit was, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to keep doing this every week. But then there is a bit of that validation that actually we are in some way creating a more transparent workplace where people want to share these different views and they feel comfortable to do so. And I think that was the bit that was really exciting to me, is that people were reading these. They were having different conversations with their teammates as a result. And hopefully, you know, it creates a better environment for everybody. But yes, it was a fair lift to keep on writing it, but definitely worth it. Now I've dialed it back. It's not a weekly one anymore. Yeah. Now it goes out on a Thursday as well because of the weekend being different here in the Middle East.
Okay, very good, nice. Patrick, and we'll come back around to the whole process of the book, because I'm quite curious about that as well. Patrick, yours, if you were to boil down your book, It Makes Zero Sense. In its essence, it's about reducing or removing the negatives from your life. How have you applied that to your life? How should I apply it to my life as well?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, I come from a culture or from a community, Lebanese, and, you know, in the 70s, 80s, we had zero possibilities. And one of the things that made us, you know, as a culture, as a society, grow in the region and globally, is where we have achieved a lot as a race, as Lebanese people. And that for me, like, was very difficult to understand until I've become more mature in life. So I came up with this sentence, which is like in the beginning of the book, is when you have zero possibilities, you have hero. When you have zero chances, you have hero possibilities. So I think that started to, you know, the zero started to come in my mind. And how do you, zero is actually not nothing. How it is not the difference between just the negative and the positive. So I started thinking about it. I wanted to understand, what is elimination of negatives? How can you reach the art of perfection? How can you reach the best possible practice? I've never done it. I don't think anyone has.
No, we're human.
I mean, exactly. Even if we're artificial, it's also impossible. So the idea is, what can we do to reach the zero perfection or the zero error state? And that's what I wanted to start. I can't do a zero state life. I can't do a zero bulletproof business. It's impossible. So while I was working in a corporate job, I'm in pandemic as well, which I think that's like the pandemic inspired us to start to dig down of the people who we truly can be in the future. And I started to say, okay, how can I create a company that focuses first on the best possible practices for my clients, for my staff, for my team, for my investors, and so forth. It's merely impossible. It's just impossible because, by definition, as you said, you need to have a perfect human to have a perfect business. And it's not just about you, it's about everybody else. So how do you create this culture of perfection, of elimination of negatives, do the right thing, is very difficult. So I started to write notes. And I think what made me write the book is the amount of notes I took on myself. I have more than 2,000 pieces of notes before I wrote the book.
Are you doing that on your phone?
Laptop. I have like a folder full of notes. I take it on I have 2 phones. Each phone has different one.
Yeah.
I write things. I have like a post-it.
You need to reduce one of those phones down.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it made me feel comfortable that, okay, this is going into an interesting place. And what do I call this elimination of negatives? I always felt guilty for 0. I started to feel more guilty for 0, and people have the catchphrase, it makes 0 sense as it makes no sense. And it's just unfair. I mean, I'm not going to be emotional about it, but it's not fair because it makes 0 sense actually could make a lot of sense. So that's the book. The book is about going into the journey of 0, looking at its history in math, looking at its history in Formula 1, for example. You'll find some things about the digit 0. You'll find some things about the number 0. You'll find some things about how each culture or some cultures look at 0, and definitely 0 error and elimination of negatives and so forth. So I started to find the power of 0. And that's the story of the book. It gets you there. But it's a light book. It's not meant to intend to tell people they're wrong. It's meant to intend to tell people, okay, just consider this part. Consider reaching to your best possible situation by elimination of negatives, not just by reaching perfection without removing or reducing your error. And that's the book. It's a consideration of a 0 mindset. And I hope it resonates with people and people start at least doing things.
I'm sure it will. The very first time you mentioned it to me, we ran into each other in a cafe and you mentioned it to me and it really struck me. I thought, that's an interesting idea. And at the time you were talking about, things like you'd even removed an alarm in the morning to wake you up. You're like, I don't like how that wakes me up. I'm just removing it and I'll wake up at the time that I want to wake up. What are some of the other things that you removed?
Very uncorporate, but I mean, look, I have a weekly calendar only. I don't have any appointments after 10 days. Wow. I don't do that. I genuinely don't have an interest in being a prisoner to a calendar. I don't want to be a prisoner to an alarm. I don't want to be a prisoner to a lot of things. We can wake up at 7 alone. We just need to have this mind practice. It's very normal. People wake up in the morning. If you sleep early, you'll wake up early. Constant reminders in life is not nice. I mean,
calendar only goes out 10 days.
0, nothing. I have 0.
I bumped into him yesterday. I could see you as he was saying it, and I was the same.
I mean, unless it's a trip, impossible to. My calendar is free. You can check
unless it's very pleasurable.
Unless we're going skiing in November, it's impossible because I don't believe in the system. I don't want the system.
But I think, Patrick, we all that resonates with everybody, right? And we're all jealous of you there.
Great.
Yeah.
But I guess it's the discipline of letting go of the things that you need to let go of.
It's the content as well.
You also step down from, you're in multiple companies, you're a very successful businessman, you step back from lots of things, right? And I guess that's where the discipline needs to kick in, right?
And you've got to change your life to go around with it all. Yeah.
You have to change your life. You have to start accepting things. Yeah. Start saying, okay, you know what? Maybe it's not important, that particular thing. And you need to be more content of what you have rather than what you want to do. And I think that's a bit of maturity. I mean, it's about time to be mature. When are we going to be mature? When we're like 95? Okay, you know what? I'm 50. That's fine. Okay, you know what? That's who I am. That's what it is. And then if something better happens, okay, have the freedom for that possibility instead of just like cornering yourself down to scheduling. I mean, scheduling your life. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, when somebody tells me back-to-back meetings, I want to kill myself. Just don't say this word. What is back-to-back meetings? How successful is, I mean, I'm sorry, but it is, for me, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's frustrating that we have to be like this.
There's nothing you're saying that doesn't make perfect sense. And
that's
resonates.
why.
And I think there's a.
And I mean, no disrespect to people, but I mean, I could try it. Maybe other people can reduce it.
Yeah.
Not change it, just reduce. Doesn't need to be like shift down. Yeah.
I think one of the really powerful things you said that made me think is, we all have to ask ourselves the question of how important something is. Yeah. I think we have a natural tendency to lean into the idea of everything we're doing is so important. And then you ask yourself, if I didn't go to that meeting or if I didn't attend X, Y, and Z, what would actually happen? What would I miss out on? And in actual fact, you'd probably just be clearing up more time for yourself to create a bit more space in your life. But we'll come back to that, Patrick. So, Eleni, now it's your turn. Give us a sense of your book. Let's go into it in a bit more detail, because I know you spoke to some really big names. Maybe you could kind of explain the process behind that.
Okay, first of all, I want to say I'm very lucky to be here today, because I can say things that resonate to me, and what you said right now, it really resonates very much with where I am at the stage I am. And taking the segue also from you, Patrick, when you say that you don't want to do back-to-back, and there are other things which are important to life. So this book, by the way, which I don't consider myself as an author, okay? I just wrote down stuff which they make sense to me. Not zero sense, but they make sense to me in a way that started maybe from zero. Because I always, no matter the kind of roles I had in companies, and always, in the business development, the hard work and where you have to go and you need to be delivering and all this kind of stuff, I was always attracted to people, what every person was in real life and in real conversations. And whenever I was hearing about this is a leader, this is leadership, this is one, this is two, I was always saying that being a leader is not about if you're heading a team, you're leading a team, so you're because you got the role, you are a leader. And I started this book by interviewing people to understand how they are inside them, okay? How they did the journey from where they were in the very, very beginning, 5-6 years old, to where they are now, and how they see themselves later on, not as a career path, but as a life path. And there are people here from all around the globe, different age groups, different kind of industries, different continents, different cultural backgrounds, different needs in their lives. Okay, I will say one thing about a guy who is 85 years old in the book. He's the founder of Reebok. And he went through very ups and downs, losing the job, losing the brand. And I asked him, what do you want to do? And he said, more, Eleni. And I said, you're joking. You're 85, you want to do more. And there are other people. He
needs to read Patrick's book.
Yes.
I'll send him a copy.
I think that's a problem here. Yeah. And you had this person, and you had someone else, like Anousheh Ansari, who was born in Iran, and she wanted to leave that place and go to the stars. And now she's the CEO of X Prize. Okay, and she really went to the stars. So you see this kind of journey, which is not because they had things back in their time, and I do agree with you. We had nothing in the 70s and 80s. And one of the things I saw for all these people is that they came almost from nothing, and they managed not to be captured, not to be imprisoned in the expectations of what was surrounding them. They decided to do, a leap of faith. The second thing that I found out was that, and this is what my mother was used to say when I was also younger, that we are not defined by our capabilities, but by our aspirations, because this is what makes us create new capabilities, develop new things to do. I'm not the person I was 40 years ago. And I will not be the same in 10 years from now. I will be more crazier, probably. And the last thing which
Greek blood.
Yeah,
the Greek blood.
Yeah. That's true. I want to be as crazy as possible.
Well, let's come back to that.
And
That's
the
another
last
podcast.
thing is that, because everyone said, everything is about hard work. But finally, I think needs to be hard work for the hard work you put. So this hard work is not being wasted. No matter what you decide to do, don't do it for nothing, even if you want to wake up 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 5 o'clock, needs to be resonating with you, and all the effort you put needs to be for something, because everything needs to have hard work.
In terms of all of these different messages that came out of the book, were there any common threads that ran through them in terms of the process and getting it out of each of the individuals?
I think one thing that was a backbone of that is that everyone wanted to talk. They're so nice. You talk to people who are very much into what they do, and very stressed. Everybody wanted to talk. And I think I had the 4 key elements I found out of that, which I call it the 4 C's, is, first of all, they were all, curious to see what's happening next door, what happened next. So they didn't...
In their own lives or with other individuals?
Everything, in their own lives, in the stage they were, where they want to go. They were curious to see what can happen after. No one was in still waters and say, okay, I'll stay here, it's good for me. But they had the power to do that, okay? Because not everyone can be very curious. The second thing is that they had the courage to do that. because I think courage is when you're very good with yourself and you're good with your skin, and you don't know from the beginning, you get into that and you become more courageous and more courageous. The third one was collaborating. So they didn't have an issue to go and talk with people and start seeing how they can actually create some forms of working together with someone. Either this was within their family, their circle, their society, or outside. And the last, which I think it's very critical, it's commitment to do that. This is where the hard work comes as well. So if you commit to do something and you put the hard work, and I know there might be crying and disappointment and questioning yourself. If you say, I'm going to go there, even if you want to leave your company, even if you want to take a divorce, even if you want to move to a country that no one knows you, that's commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the process of sitting down with all of these people, and I guess getting them to share their life story out onto a page, maybe you could tell us how that went, and then the process of giving that back to them, and what ended up in the book. Was there stuff that was removed from the book?
Okay. Some of the people, I knew them in person, so they knew me. They knew what kind of a character I am, and they knew I'm sharing. I'm telling stuff to people. If they cannot tolerate, that's their problem.
Are you one of these characters?
I was thinking not to put my story at the end, but the publisher said, put it.
So you are?
I am at the end. But I was very shy what to put over there. I can't, no, really.
I'm sure,
I'm not shy in this kind of conversations.
I mean, you definitely don't look shy. Yeah.
I used to be. So there were people I knew and they knew me, and they said, let's do that. So we start the conversations with not a fixed flow. I had 4 or 5 questions about what is your life, what do you think, how was your past experiences, and as we're going forward, I was adjusting the conversation based on the person, okay? And then I was introduced to other people, and I was doing break the ice meeting just to see that we are matching, because if we don't match, we cannot discuss. And then all these people came after we saw that there is a connection, there is a chemistry. So the process was, we sit down, we talk very openly for 2-3 hours. I take the comments, I write down, I record so I don't write something down differently because they come from different cultures. And then I was creating the story and I was sharing this with them to say, do they feel comfortable with the outcome? And this is where we're going back and forth to what extent they want to be comfortable with revealing some of the stuff, or the things they were putting on the table, which might be a little bit different than what is their, the way they're being seen in the region or where they are based out. And we finally came down to something that felt authentic. So no lies, no show off, no nothing. But at the same time, they felt comfortable with that to be on a piece of paper.
What did you learn from the interactions with these people in terms of extracting sounds exploitative, but in terms of how in all of these interactions with people, what did you learn in terms of getting information from people? Like you mentioned, it went quite long form, like 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. Was it in the last 30 minutes that they really started to open up? Was it the time you spent with them? Was it the rapport you developed with them? How did you do that, and what did you learn from it?
They started depending on who was on the other side, and it's not only if they knew me, but also the where they were coming from. So people who are more Mediterranean or more open to share things, they were like, take everything, it's yours. Take the stream, it's yours, Eleni.
I have nothing else to say. I don't want to hide anything in my life. I'm out of the closet.
I know, that's you guys down here. I think we're probably more in our
That's Mediterranean, buddy.
Yeah. So the problem was on me, how much of this should I
condense it all?
And other people who they come from a very Asian culture where they were being, raised very, very specifically. Yeah. And we had to go step by step. And maybe sometimes I had to do 2 interviews. Because the first one I was sharing, and then we were doing that again, and again trying to take things down and understand. So some of them I was starting from the beginning to share, some of them later on. And it was very obvious from the beginning, very transparent, that if you don't want something to be written or mentioned, you tell me on the spot. Okay, this is not for me to be famous, and I didn't expect, by the way, to have this finally as an outcome. It's for us to build something that connects us. The main thing for me that was amazing, 2 things came out of me for this, for me. The first one, I learned more things about myself because I had to be part of it. I had to be listening and not for a business goal. Okay, that was really a human interaction. And the second one, I made friends. People I never thought they would allow me to be part of their life. And the things that have come out of here, they have been lessons for me, if I can say that.
I think also they made a friend as well.
Oh, they have to.
Because, I mean,
Well, it's quite, I'd imagine that maybe we go into the processes of pulling your books together. I'd imagine it's very much a bi-directional vulnerability in a way, right? Because you're opening up.
Yeah.
And Renee was sharing kind of family stuff and what was going on. So I'd imagine that whole process is, it's kind of a shared experience where after it, even though you've only spent 2 hours with somebody, you feel like you probably know them more than you would otherwise. Renee, in terms of the process for your book, because I'm sure there's a lot of people in our network that tend to be very high function and high performing people, and I'm sure on their bucket list somewhere is to publish a book. So the process of doing that, yours is a bit unique because a colleague brought it to a publisher, which I'd love to know a bit about that colleague. You must be working together a long time.
or they fought a lot. Now they're not in
We had a
contact.
very open relationship.
Oh, that's a statement.
Yeah, I'd say so. But in terms of the process then, right, so your colleague brings it to the publisher obviously likes the sound of it, and then you sit down with the publisher in that process of transforming something that was in terms of how it was pulled together in email format and then pulling it into a book. What did you learn about the process of writing a book and about yourself when you were doing it?
Very good. I learned an enormous amount about writing a book. I don't know, assume you're the same. There is a lot more involved, hands down to anybody that can write a novel in particular, where you have to be creative as well as structure. So I did really enjoy that part of it. Interesting, when I was listening to you, Eleni, and you were saying, themes that were coming out of yours. Part of this was actually taking emails that had spanned over a number of years and then saying, well, how do you condense this into insightful pieces that are relevant? And interestingly, what you described and some of the learnings that you had there, what we did was structure this under purpose, people, path, and progress. Because purpose, what are you doing these things for, was one of the things that resonated so much. People was about, who you're surrounding yourself with, which maybe goes to a little bit to what you've been writing about, Patrick. The path is, we all look to learn from others. But certainly, one of the key learnings, there's no one right path. To chart things yourself. And then the progress bit came to the fact that you've just got to be continuously learning. It's not about a destination where you're suddenly going to get there at a certain age or a certain job or etc. It's about continual progress. I hope I'm 85 and want to be doing more as well. So I learned a lot about the writing process, and then learn a lot about how do you structure this so that it's a logical sequence.
What about yourself during that process as you're learning and pulling together? Because it's quite an arduous task.
It is quite an arduous task. I may be divorced if I agreed to do anything like this again, because it turned into
Do it.
Saturdays. No, I actually like him.
No, he's a positive. He's
a positive influence.
Okay.
Sorry.
But it was sort of,
Sorry to Renee's husband.
Yes, but you sort of, you're CEO of a business, so you're fairly busy from a day, and then he says, great, you want to write a book. And so it turned into a lot more weekend work that was planned. I think I learned the obvious, that there's a bit of discipline in there. I love writing. I kind of knew it as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and all the way through.
But did you refine that? You found that again, or was it something that you knew throughout your career that enjoy writing?
Well, I kind of enjoyed it, but enjoying writing a business memo is not the same as enjoying. So I learned that I really enjoyed the writing element of it, and that in fact that was something that can be relaxing and enjoyable, and something I'd certainly like to spend more time on. And then you have to really learn to get comfortable with I guess, the vulnerability of it, of, you know, sharing more about your life than you would normally, particularly in a corporate sense and things like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey pulling it together, I'm sure. Patrick, your process of going through this, maybe you could explain a little bit about it, because I know you had one idea in your head, and then the process, I think you rewrote it several times, right?
7 times, to be honest. I wrote 1,100 something pages, and I'm publishing like less than 200. Because, I mean, going back to your fascinating story, I really can't wait to read the book. The one thing I'm reminded to is a statement called by Rumi, is the art of learning is unlearning.
Yes.
And when I started writing this book, I had to unlearn. I mean, unlearning started with me when I did my MBA in my 40s. I was this guy with 20-year-olds. I was so sure I was the smartest one in the room. I was so confident, like, you're all idiots, nobody knows anything. First semester, I was like 4th from the back in scores. And then one of the deans of the university said, listen, Patrick, you know, you have good ideas. You just in a different place on your own. You have to follow the process. You have to follow this rule. This is a French university. We are extremely annoying, but you have to follow them.
Yes.
And so I had to unlearn how to listen, unlearn how I used to listen, unlearn how to, I took things. And unlearning became the most difficult thing than learning. It's easy to pick up new habits. Now remove habits.
Yes.
I mean, come on, gaining a kilo is super easy. Removing a kilo is super hard.
Tell me about it.
Trust me, I know. So the idea is how to unlearn, you know, was one of the biggest things that started to drive me becoming a writer. And I had to do it on myself. I was my first example.
Yeah.
And pretty much most of the things I've done in this book, I was the first example. I think the life I'm going for is the first example. That's what I'm trying to achieve, maybe. But unlearning was the biggest challenge. Removing these things, not expecting what I say is right. Because I needed to challenge myself. You know, there's this theory called the 10th man theory. And you get 10 people in the room, so we're all here, and then they say, like, there's one guy who has to say no.
Yeah.
Even if we all believe it's right, we all have to say, one guy is there just to make sure, one guy or girl, I mean, that's what I mean, has to say no, in order just to create the challenge, to make sure we have scratched every single, you know, part of our heads, all the data, everything, to make sure we get the best possible outcome. So I was the 10th guy to myself. I was like, it was like, you know, that's definitely a crazy madhouse. You know, that's what's going on there. But unlearning was a big part, and that's what started to get me. Okay, say I wrote this chapter. Okay, destroy it. I wrote this part. Destroy it. Then I said, okay, let me write 1 page of every chapter, and then dive into that, and then make it better, and then make it better, and then make it better. I reached like 1,000, I think 1,200 pages. And then I had to make them to, I mean, the first 80 pages I wrote, I took 1 page. I hired a publisher to help me. And then they were just like, you need too much help. So, I know. So the sane thing to do is to work on that. I fired the publisher, I got another publisher, because then I realized I needed a writing coach. I didn't need a publisher. So I took a writing coach. And then because I wrote everything. I had to get my mind in this. I had to organize this myself. So I need to be disciplined first. So I got a writing coach. And then I started to read a lot. I started to ask myself a lot of questions. And then I said, nobody is gonna judge me on this book. Let me write what I truly feel. That's what makes creativity important, is what is it that you really feel about what you want to write. So in my book, you have a chapter called, you know, Unlearn. There's a chapter called The Art of Nothing, because I believe in the art of nothing. The Danish call it the Nixon. It's part of being creative. Yeah. I believe that you need to unlearn. You know, I believe there's things that make zero sense are important. I believe in elimination of negatives and uncertainty. I believe that these things happen to us. So I said, let me write things that I believe in and then make them believable to other people. There's a chapter called Pineapple on Pizza. of actually things that don't make sense. So what better way to call it than pineapple on pizza? And then inside it, you like things, which is the calendar, which is the alarm, which is all of these things that don't make, there's a lot of like below the table stuff as well, funny stuff, just because you relate to these, like what we were having today in coffee, we spoke about a few things. So that's who you want to be as an author.
But it sounds like, because I know you well,
yes.
right? And you're genuinely one of the most interesting people I know.
Thank
like
you.
You're an authentic person. You say what you believe, and you're fun and entertaining and erudite and bright. And it's fun being around you, you know. And it sounds like you've poured that out onto the pages. I haven't read your book. It could be terrible.
It could be.
It's coming out soon, isn't it?
It's the website, you can download it. Okay. I mean, I'll send you
Please.
all copies with the invoice anyway. No?
Yeah.
So the idea is, I wanted to show my true self. I mean, I'm the guy who registered a website called In a Funny Way. I mean, that's the guy who I am. You know, I like light humor. I am extremely situational. I like things to be simple and positive and interesting and funny. I don't have envy in my life. I can't get jealous. I don't have hate. You know, that's the person who I am. I believe haters are secret admirers anyway. That's what's also written in the book. So that's the person who I am, and that tells you a story of this character, you know, who is truly me, and you know how I see things around me. But you need to be crazy enough to be an author.
Yeah.
You need to have to do a run or a jog and say, okay, Friday email, let me just change the world because we're all trapped in this COVID. You need to have this crazy moment. You need to, she will never be a journalist, but she will be an author, because if she's gonna make sure people are comfortable, she wants to make sure she gets their story out in their own comfort. That journalism is about destroying other people's lives. She wants to create this way of sharing other people's lives in situations where other people can help. And that's what made you put yourself in the story. We need to be crazy enough to find creativity, or else how can you find it? Or else how can you be an author? And that's what my book is a bit about.
Patrick, wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Eleni, let's go into not so much the process of your book, because we've done that, but the final chapter, which is you. Okay. So tell us a little bit about writing about yourself. You mentioned earlier on, you alluded to earlier on, I felt, that you were shy many years ago, and you're totally different now, like all of us. And tell us about that journey, about writing in the book about yourself and what you revealed and what you know, how comfortable you were doing that. What was that like?
Okay. So first of all, when I was a little girl, I was very shy and I was easily crying if someone was shouting at me.
Okay.
But I found out as I was growing up that I was not shy. I was keeping things to myself because I didn't know how to express them. There was no role model around me. Greece, you know, it's in the 70s. This is not something they tell you, oh, sweetheart, come on, show and tell what you want.
It was a right-wing dictatorship.
So it was very much like, oh, you have to do that.
Say in the 90s. Huh? When you were young, in the 90s. Say that.
Yeah.
When I was young,
like 2000?
2000.
I think so in 2000.
They believe if you said you were growing up in the 90s.
So, and to give you an idea, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a gymnast. I want to be a dancer, nothing with business. But my father said, no, you're not going there to be on a stage with feathers, wherever they can be stuck. And then, no, you have to study, you have to do this and that. And I was very much trapped into this. And as I was growing older, I said, enough. I need to speak up, I need to say what I think. And I felt very nice because I made other people uncomfortable.
Like
and
Patrick, you too.
And oh my God, you should not meet my husband. I felt very nice of that. So when it was a time to write my story, I was not sure if I would like to do that. Because first of all, I said, this is about the others, the people I, hosted on my sofa. It was not a sofa, it was a virtual thing anyway, or when we're talking. And then I said, what am I going to talk about myself? Then I became like, oh, Eleni, you say to others, open up, and then for yourself, stay as you are. And as I was going through, I found out, I started remembering things about myself that I had forgotten. It was like having this golden fish memory that you remember all the things that happened in the last, few hours. And as I was going through, I could find things that were very important to me that I want to share, like I say that 100% between a good job and a good partner, take the partner. The good job will come again, or even it doesn't come. Who cares? But having a good partner can actually be with you and understands you and loves you. It's very important. There were things about how I was brought to life, and I will say that here, it doesn't matter. My mom doesn't speak English. So I came from two parents too young to be parents. Okay, and at some point I felt I became very serious in my life from the very early stage, and maybe I want to get more, crazy as I grow.
Are you a single child
older.
or the eldest child? Or
Eldest, that's the thing. So you get into having all these kind of way of
abilities.
Yeah.
Okay, but I said, should I say that about my mom if someone reads a book and tells her? And the last thing about my piece here is I said, okay, I'm not gonna hide things about who I am, but I'm not gonna mention people who they didn't do good to me, because I don't want them. This is not the purpose of that. Okay, the purpose of that is to me to read it and say, okay, I said stupid things, I've done stupid things, I've done some good, it's okay, I'm good. And that was the process for me. So I have personal stuff, business stuff, my kids stuff, everything. I feel that it's Eleni. That's me.
no
Was
dancing?
was the hardest part writing about yourself
Yes.
in the book?
Yeah, of course, always, because you are criticizing yourself and you say all these kind of 4 C's and 4 P's and whatever it is, and what have you done, sweetheart or honey? How have you applied this to your life? And you start thinking, oh my God. So yeah, it's a revelation.
It's easy to give advice, right? And
Yes,
that's
of course.
yourself.
I'm a mother, I'm a parent, I know what I say to my kids, and then they come back to me and say, you told us not to say, how can I say, not to lie. Why are you lying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
You should take back dancing classes.
Yeah,
Come on, it's when you're 5 years old, you have to go back to dancing.
Yeah, maybe that's it. One last question for everybody, and that would be, if you were offering advice for CEOs in our network based on your book, right? And that can be as detailed or as broad as you want. What would you take away from your book that you'd share with someone else in terms of a piece of advice? Renee, you're put on the spot because you're beside me.
No
Think
worries.
quickest.
That's fine. For actual CEOs, I think it's about charting your path in the moment. I think a lot of what we study and look at and we aspire to be is a picture of a CEO, but every moment is different. So whether it's, the moment in your life, the moment in a company, the moment in, a macroeconomic environment, you have to chart the path for your moment. So, finding the right tips, the right guidance, the doing that, and knowing that there isn't going to be one right way, but taking stock of your path in the moment.
And I suppose it's great advice, and it also applies to people who are on their way up in the trajectory as well, right? Because there's not... The route to success is meandering and circuitous, and it's individual to
and even
who you are.
Still today, it's we still think too hierarchically, too much of a ladder, as opposed to this network of possibilities and things that can happen, and that nothing happens in a vacuum. You're part of a world, a community. You're surrounded by different people. So
yeah, love it. Patrick?
I like what Henry Ford said. Do the great quality even when no one's looking. And I think that is, the ultimate case of perfection. So we are our true enemies, ourselves. And if we treat ourselves when we are alone with our best practices, we start to convey that to the rest of the world. If we are disciplined in our own room, in our own lives, in front of the mirror, that will allow us to be much better in front of other people. Don't be great just because you're in front of people, and just be nonsense when you're alone. This is very difficult, by the way.
It is.
Because when you're alone, you just want to be wrong. You don't want to be right, because nobody's judging. But when you want to judge yourself, when you have the whip on your own hand for yourself, that's the hardest thing to do. And try to make yourself happy and satisfied to yourself instead of for other people. That's the excellence, how it starts, portraying on yourself. When you work, when you live with partners, with relationships, with your family, you should be the first example, and that's what I'm starting to hopefully achieve. Maybe when I'm 85.
Temptation resisted is the ultimate sign of character, right? So that's it. When you're on your own and you're making the right choices. Eleni, what would be your piece of advice that you would offer based on all the stories? It can be parts taken from individual ones or combined together.
I will build on top of you, what you both said, because all of them are really, really relevant and critical. I will say to anyone who is in a leadership position, no matter the age, the gender, or where this person is earn your seat. Meaning, don't stay on what you've done and how good you were, or what you know and you feel proud of that. You have to every time think that when you go into a new situation, you need to earn the respect and the acknowledgement of everyone around you. And even if you are an older person and going to a younger community and you need to be leading these people, you need to earn them. So no hierarchical, not because you do things and you were appraised for that, but because you need to put value all the time. So earn your seat, because this is what makes you actually a force for your life and the others.
I love it. Guys, thank you so much for your time. It's been very insightful.
Thank you.
And it was wonderful to have you on our conversations on successful perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.